Hi, this is Nikki. I'm so glad to have you here on my channel today. If you have not seen it yet, this is part 2 of must-see embossing folder techniques. I've already done one video with 5 different must-see ways, and now we're adding on to that because embossing folders are amazing and they have so many different uses. So we are going to look at 6 different cards today. We're going to look at 3 different embossing folders. One of the embossing folders comes with a matching stencil, which also gives you lots of options. So let's pop in and see. We're going to do 2 Altenew embossing folders and 1 Spellbinders. The Altenew embossing folder is the one that has the matching stencil. If you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit the like and subscribe on my channel. I'd love to have you back. We're going to start with these cards. And so we've got some backgrounds. We've got these beautiful wedding cards. And I'm going to show you how I made all of these so that you can get the most out of those embossing folders. Now, don't worry. All of these items will be linked in the description, so you don't have to keep up with the names. We're going to start with this Altenew set, which might be one of my favorites of the year because I always struggle with wedding cards. So this one comes with its simple coloring stencil, which means it's not super intricate, but it just makes such a cool impact. So this just is pretty simple. It has 3 parts, which is really nice. Makes it super easy, and you can go in and add more details if you want. But the thing is when you're ink blending this, a lot of times when it has that 3D embossed look, it's going to have so much detail. So the folder is right here, and it's, I believe, a 6x6. You can see it's got a raised and a lowered part. This is a 3D embossing folder because it has multiple layers to the dimension so that you know that there are a lot of details, and you'll see when we make our first impression. So first tip, when it's an image, you've got to decide how you want your card layout to be. So I'm going to do some that are vertical and I'm going to do some that are horizontal because you can see with this typical A2, you've got a lot of extra detail that is not going to end up on your card because this is a larger folder than that. So you can kind of decide how you want the placement before you put the piece of paper in there. And that also gives you lots of variability in what your final result is going to be. I know it may be hard to see all these details because I've just got a white piece of paper here, but this direction I did the horizontal, and you see I've got her dress and some flowy parts, but I wanted to keep my flowers up in the top left corner, and then I'm going to show it to you in the vertical landscape, in a vertical version. Okay, I'm going to pop in the vertical versus horizontal. I know it's hard to see because it's on white paper, but I'm going to make it easier for you with this next card. So we're going to start out with heat embossing, and we're going to open our folder up, and we're going to add ink to the side that has the impression in it. So the middle part of this wedding picture is actually going down into the folds, okay? So that when we put the piece of paper facing this way, the back side, which has an impression that comes out, is going to push our image out, okay? And I know that it's weird that I put embossing ink all over this, but I really like this effect. I did use some anti-static powder, and this is going to kind of make an impression all around our image as well as inside the image with the embossing powder. So I'm putting it in. And I'm going to use some platinum embossing powder. This is from Altenew, and it matches this cardstock really well. I saw a little piece of hair in there, so I needed to get that out. And then I'm going to show you, it's almost like there's a glow of embossing powder around the image, and that is what I like about this type of look. It's a beautiful embossing powder that looks very similar to the cardstock but is nice and shiny, and to me it just shows off how nice that impressed image is, and also kind of like a little glow around it. I really like that a whole lot. And since we covered most of this plate with embossing ink, I can kind of add the embossing powder wherever I want to on this card panel because it is all kind of wet. And then I can use a brush if there's a spot that I'm not liking, or if I feel like my shadow outside the image is just too large or anything like that. I can take a paintbrush and just scrape that little area off before I heat it up. So this still hasn't been heated, so you can do all kinds of things. See, I can brush it with my fingers. I'm going to grab a paintbrush and also fix just a couple little areas. And here's what it looks all heat embossed. So nice and shiny, really beautiful. All you got to do is add a sentiment. So now we're going to do the embossing the exact opposite way so that I can show you the difference in when you're using your embossing ink pad. So I'm going to use the ink pad again, but I'm going to spread it on the image that is raised. Last time we spread it on the opposite side. So this time it's going to be pressed down into the paper and make kind of like a little well that has this image and the embossing powder in it. Okay, so we'll get it all nice and inked up, and then let me show you what this looks like. So doing this, I still get a little bit of that extra outside the image, so I just take my brush and scrape that off. I think I just hit it with the ink pad. So if you do, no big deal. And then when you heat it, it's all that beautiful, shiny embossing right there inside the image. And I don't know if you can see it changing, but it's just a beautiful, shiny platinum color, which is going to look so nice with just a simple sentiment. Not much else needs to be added to this card. It just looks so gorgeous. So once you get it heated up, then we'll go on and I'm going to show you what using the stencils is like on this card and how simple it is. Okay, so I know this is a long video. If you don't want to see the stencil part and you want to jump ahead to looking at Copic Coloring plus Watercoloring embossing folders, I will have that set as a chapter for you so that you can do that. I'm only going to use 2 colors per, so like 2 blues, 2 pinks, and 2 of the other colors in this so that I get a little bit of variation, but I'm trying to keep this one very light and very simple. So I lined it up to do the guy right here, and then I'm going to do the wedding dress and the flowers, and that's really all you have to do. It keeps it pretty simple, and when you're doing these colors, because it's raised up, I've already embossed it, it really does give it a lot of detail without you having to do a whole lot. And you'll see sometimes I lift the stencil up and look, because when I've embossed the image ahead of time, sometimes I need to make sure that I'm actually lined up the way I need to be, because if I get my stencil a little bit off, I can go outside the line. So that's why I lift it up, look, and add a little color if I need to. I know it's hard to see that on camera, so I got you a photo right here and just zoomed in on it. It was super light colors. Now I'm going to use some warm grays, some darker warm grays for the suit. So the wedding dress I started with W0, and I'm going to color in the whole thing just to give it a little light color against this background. This is a white background. And then once we get our Copic coloring done, we're going to add some metallic watercolor that's going to add just some amazing, beautiful little parts to this. So of course, like I said, I will link all of these Copic markers, but I'll try to pop in and tell you what I'm using at each little clip I give you. Now, I don't consider myself, Copic coloring is not my favorite thing to do, but I really love how easy it is with an embossing folder. Do you see that I'm just taking the W2 and I'm following the lines of the dress just to create more depth there? So I'm going to kind of follow this with W2. So to keep everything really cohesive, I decided that I would just use my darker warm grays to create the suit that this man has on. So I'm just going to color my base color as W7. So the dress was W0 and W2, and then the base of this suit is going to be W7. And then I used W8 for the darker parts of the suit. Lastly, I added some red and green for the flowers. So let me show you the final product. So here's how that coloring looks before we start adding our metallic watercolor. Super nice, but the metallic watercolor really takes it over the top. So you don't want to use a ton of water, and I'm using a little tiny brush, but on this dress, there's little details that look like pearls to me, and I think that's where I kind of came up with the idea. So I'm going along and just adding details to those pearls and into the little areas of her dress that are shaped, and I know it may be hard for you to see this. I'm going to try to zoom in, but I wanted you to see that I was using this kind of like white, silvery pearly color down at the bottom of the Altenew metallic palette there. So it's that far left one, and I'm just using a teeny amount of water and getting a lot of saturation on my brush to do these details. Okay, let me show you how this is coming along. I'm just adding this nice, beautiful watercolor to those kind of, they're supposed to look, I think, beaded, and I'm just kind of dotting it along the little beaded areas. I love how it looks. It gives it such a nice shimmer, and it's just one of those things. I have not used this color in my watercolor pan very often, and now I know I am definitely going to go back to it. I feel like this is just a really classic, traditional wedding card, and I am always in need of those. So if you haven't done it yet, would you check and make sure that you're subscribed to my channel and that you've hit the like button on this video? I am creating chapters for this video, so if you decide that you want to see Copic coloring versus watercoloring versus heat embossing, all of that is going to be listed so that you can skip ahead to what type of embossing folder look you want to check out. So when we're done with this watercolor one, we are going to look at different embossing folders and a couple of ways to use them as your background to really spice up what's in the back of your card. All right, let's look at this up close. I'm going to freeze frame it and kind of zoom in. Do you see how that shimmers? So beautiful. I added some final splatters of the shimmer around the card as well. I know that's very hard to pick up in a picture, but it's just beautiful. Let's get started on backgrounds. So this is the Tufted Elegance background from Altenew. It has two sides. Remember when you do this, and I'm going to compare the two sides to show you, but you've really got two options of backgrounds every time you run something through the embossing folder. One of my favorite ways to use an embossing folder background is just by using it in a solid color. So this one I'm using white, but it looks so amazing in dark colors, and it just really adds to your background. So on the cards that I did with the beautiful purple flowers, these are just die cuts. Look at how just adding that background can really change up the back of your card and add so much dimension. So I just don't want you to forget that just embossing white paper or a solid color paper really gives you a wow factor that is so easy and just makes all of your cards really pop out. So let me show you some finals of this so that you can see it, and then I'm going to show you in a dark blue color what this background will look like. All right, here's how that plain white background looks. It looks so nice with just some die cuts. It's just beautiful. Now let's look at using a blue piece of cardstock, and we're going to add some black soot distress oxide to the edges to give it that spotlight type look. So I'm going to do some ink blending before I run it through the embossing folder. This is one of my, I would say this is like my second favorite way to just add an embossing folder background. I love to just add a little complementary ink blending. So since this is a dark blue, the black soot looks really nice along the edges. It just kind of blends in and makes it a darker blue with like a black outline. And that looks really cool when you run it through the embossing folder, because it's really going to make the center of your card stand out like it's got a spotlight on it. So I'm going to continue ink blending this. I'll speed this up a little bit, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when it comes out of the embossing folder. Okay, so here we go. Look at how beautiful that spotlight effect looks. I just love the way it does. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I've got everything all fixed, and I'm going to put it inside my embossing folder. You need to remember that your ink blended side is what you're going to want to see. So make sure you put it in correctly. I'm going to have my ink blended side where the embossing pushes out of the paper. You could also have it push in, but the way I put it in this embossing folder is so that it pushes out. So let's look at it. All right, so here it comes. Look at how beautiful that is. I tried to zoom in for you. You can see the outside edges have that darker look, and the middle is more like a spotlight. I'm going to use this on a card, and I'll show it to you at the end, that has a wax seal and a beautiful red flower in the middle. It really makes this background just look amazing. Let me show you in some different angles. I just love how this background really adds to the card. Those bright red flowers really make it pop. So this is a Spellbinders embossing folder. Next, I'm just reminding you at the beginning of the video so you know, we did heat embossing on the plate where it's a little bit messy and kind of creates a shadow around it. I really love this effect. Next, we used that same embossing plate, but we depressed it into the actual paper so that this embossing you can see is down in the grooves there. Gives us a completely different look. Next, we used a coordinating stencil on our embossing folder, which looks beautiful. Then we decided to use some Copic markers and some watercolor. If you don't own any metallic watercolors, I highly suggest them just because you can add them to things like Copic markers and splatter on your papers. They really do help your project stand out. Now these last two, we just used a white background. We didn't add anything extra except using our embossing folder, and they turned out beautiful. And remember, you can use whatever embossing folders you have to create some amazing looks. So just grab them, try them out. And if you haven't seen part 1 of this video, I have 5 must-see ways to use embossing folders. That's part 1. So you may want to check that out if you're loving embossing folders as much as I am. If you're using any of the products or wanting to check them out, make sure you check the description. It will have links to all the products that I used today. I hope you had a wonderful time. Hit like, subscribe, and I hope to see you again on my channel. Have a great day. Bye.